Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. This evening, I've brought some folks back to visit us again that were here about a year ago. We had two representatives from an organization called Results. And Results is a national organization here in the United States that's dedicated toward creating the political and public will to handle the worst instances of poverty and hunger in the world, in the United States and in the world. And so I've asked them to come back because we've had some interesting things occur for us in the last 5 or 6 months with the political climate here in the United States, the elections we had, the new administration, the sort of enhanced public interest in this whole area of what it is that we can do as individuals to have an impact on our democracy. So I'm very pleased to have with me tonight Diane Warren. Hello, Diane. Thank you for being here this evening. Appreciate you coming. Peter Fikowski, if I pronounced that correctly,
That's
I
right.
hope.
Yeah, thank you.
And Bruce Preville. And Bruce, you were with us last time we had this show.
A year ago.
A year ago, almost to the month, actually. So this is really fantastic. So welcome. Appreciate your coming here to Reference Point this evening. And I want to start out by asking, Peter, I'm going to ask you to give us a little bit of background on Results, because I think that this whole story of where the organization originated is important to understand in the context of what we're going to talk about this evening, about how people can get involved, shall we say. But could you give us a little bit of data about how the organization came about?
Yeah. The organization started in '78. Sam Harris is now Sam Daly Harris because he got married. He's a high school music teacher, and he asked his students if they knew who their member of Congress was. He had taken on being interested in ending hunger and poverty, and it was clear that even at that point that the thing that stops solving hunger and poverty is the political will. That it's really the governments who say, well, we don't care, and let things go badly. And so he turned out in his school, I think 2 out of 500 kids knew who their member of Congress was. And certainly none of them had ever written a letter.
Right.
And from there, he started the organization to activate people to get their members of Congress, senators, newspapers active in talking about ending hunger and poverty and taking action on those bills that would make the biggest difference.
Great. And now you've been associated with Results since about when?
1987.
1987.
Yeah.
Okay. And Diane, how long have you been a Results volunteer?
I was in the same group as Peter was, starting in 1987, but I took a 15-year break, so I'm feeling like a new member again.
New member, energized and back again.
Yes.
And then Bruce, you've also been part of the organization for several years now as well, yes?
5 years.
5 years, okay.
And Peter was an acquaintance of mine, and I heard him talking about Results, and I asked him what it was all about, and he told me, and I said, I'm going to get involved with that. So that was 5 years ago.
Cool. All right, well, let's talk a lot more today about what Results is there to do and some of the impact that you've been having. Because the first thing you said about Sam Daly Harris was that he was asking the kids who their members of Congress were, and he had a vision about trying to do something to assist in the areas of hunger and poverty on a worldwide basis. So why do we have this kind of a problem? I mean, why is it? It is a huge problem. Hunger and poverty, I mean, you read about it all the time. But let's talk about this thing of you mentioned that political will. Diane, when we're talking about political will, what are we really talking about here?
Well, Sam really looked at that and said, well, political will, that probably means that we would lobby Congress and that we would get Congress to start to use our foreign aid effectively and to make more of our foreign aid money go actually towards poverty reduction rather than other goals.
And are we doing that? The way with that's sort of a leading question. Clearly, if the United States has leverage in the wealthiest nation in the world, we have tremendous amounts of influence in the world, and yet we see daily information about places on the planet where people don't have enough to eat, or they're living on pennies a day and that sort of a thing. And so what I'm understanding you to say is that we really could do something about that if we had the courage, the will, as you say, to try to make that happen. And so, Bruce, Results is focused on trying to find ways to get people to I mean, is it something that I do as just Dave Cokerhook, or is it
Yes.
something we try to do? How do you accomplish the objective, I guess, is the question.
Well, we have meetings with members of Congress. We write letters to the editor, op-eds, things like that. Work with the editorial writers in newspapers. So we're really trying to get the message across to members of Congress how important this is. And when we meet with them, they tell us that the concerns, the problems of people in developing countries, there's nobody that really speaks for them. They certainly can't, thousands of miles away. Their voices are not heard in Congress, and there's a lot of legislation going through Congress at any given time. So they thank us for representing those people, for speaking for those people. And if not people who do that in this country, the people in other developing countries probably wouldn't get much attention. So we're really pushing. We're pushing for foreign aid money. We're pushing for legislation that brings greater support to proven methods of enabling people to get out of poverty.
I want to talk about some of those specifics in a few minutes, because we had some discussion a few days ago before you guys got here for the show about some of the key elements. But something that I think really I'd like to get some feedback from you on. The concepts that you're talking about have this high altruistic kind of a sense to them, okay? And yet here in the United States, people are confronted with the economic situation and, finding a new job, or worried if their house is they can afford their house and all this sort of stuff. So what is the significant benefit for the average American in looking at this kind of problems that you're talking about and being willing to have us as a country do something about it? Diane?
Well, I saw the movie Slumdog Millionaire not long ago, and I actually wrote a letter to the editor about that, because I think what that showed people is that no matter how bad it looks here right now, it's nothing compared to what people, millions of people around the globe are dealing with. And we can still afford a few dollars a day for the poor, or not even a day. I mean, a $40 loan to an individual in a poor country can lift them out of poverty.
And in so doing, what does that do for us here in the States? Who wants to answer that one?
Oh.
Okay, Peter.
Well, it really depends on who you are in the matter. But after this last election, one of the things that's very clear to me is that it increases our security. That when you have kids who can't go to school because they can't afford it, mothers who are losing their kids, they have to have a lot of children in order to have any that survive. That's the formula to have people who are going to have insurrections either in their country or go overseas and become terrorists. And so in the political climate that we're coming out of, the fact that it's vital for security is one thing. A lot of us do care about our neighbors, perhaps all of us. And I know for myself, the ability to just walk down the street, see a movie of India, and it'd be really cool to see a movie of India and not say, oh my God, I'm so depressed looking at those people there. Now, for me, I realize, I say, well, it's my problem that I'm depressed.
Right.
But in the meantime, it's a wonderful thing to work on. To get them fed, because certainly it increases security. There's no question about that.
I think that's a key thing that you're commenting on here. There's a couple of reasons, in my opinion, why people would look to reach out to others, whether it's in their community or elsewhere in the country or around the world. And we see this when there are major disasters, okay, like the tsunami that hit was a year and a half ago in Asia or whatever it was, and that sort of thing, where people just recognize that others are hurting, and then they do whatever they can to assist. But beyond that, the day-to-day sort of thing is really significant, and there is a sort of what I like to call enlightened self-interest in looking at it and saying, well, hey, if I do something that enhances the situation for these people in, name a country, then what is that going to mean for me? And you just talked about it in terms of increased security. If they're fed and they have a chance of maybe making a living, then they're not as likely to pick up an AK-47 and try to do it in another way.
Absolutely.
There's another very important aspect, though, for myself, and I think for the other people who volunteer with results, is that it's a lot of fun. I mean, there's just nothing like going to a member of Congress and pitching microcredit or pitching the Global Fund for Education we might talk about later. And having the member of Congress get excited, like, oh, that's so great. That's just why I came to Congress, to make a difference. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
And so how do you help them move in that direction? This is a great piece of data here, because what we're talking about is helping our elected officials become statesmen and stateswomen. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bruce, how do you help them move in that direction?
What we try to do is stay one step ahead of them. So I'll give you an example. One thing we've been talking about for the last year or so, because of the new administration, is that it's really time for a change, especially in the way we do foreign aid. The Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, way back 48 years ago, whatever it is now, that is the original piece of legislation that's been modified slightly each year ever since. So, I mean, it's like a 48-layer onion, it has new things added and nothing's removed. So the way that we do foreign aid is very disconnected. There's no focus. There's no transparency and accountability. There's no specific objectives. There's objectives all over the place, which means there's really no focus.
I would think that some of those things can be at odds with each other too.
Absolutely.
My recollection of foreign assistance over the years has tended to be more military, maybe some political, maybe sending people some grain or some tractors or something like that, right?
The humanitarian
mostly,
part is really small.
Yes, most people don't realize that the lion's share of our foreign aid goes to our own interests, and a very small percentage of that goes to poverty reduction.
Okay. Whereas if we flip-flop that, the effects what kind of effects do you envision that we could have? If the majority of our foreign assistance went into eliminating poverty, and how do you do that?
Well, let me answer the question. It's a fascinating question, because on the one hand, our foreign aid spending may go up significantly. There's good indication it will, but it may not. And you're asking, well, what if we made it effective? What difference would it make if it made a difference than if it didn't make? If it just feeds the Beltway crowd?
Right.
And my favorite answers, I've been thinking about that a lot this last 5 months, is think about the moon program. Like, why did we go to the moon? Why did Kennedy say go to the moon? Well, there were political reasons, but there was a huge satisfaction for the country and for the world. We said, we're going to go to the moon, and then we actually did it.
Right.
And so for me, the really exciting thing about foreign aid reform is actually saying we're going to reduce poverty by 1/2, and here's the measures. And then if we actually do it, it's like, oh my God, we can actually change something in the future. Misery isn't inevitable.
So that we can have an impact. It's
right.
not one of those conditions that you just have to exist through and suffer through. But I think
right.
beyond that, if you think about what the implications are for economics, the more people who are in a position to consume, even in terms of having a decent pair of shoes or more than one type of grain or whatever, you create the movement of money throughout the planet that really enhances the economic situation too. I mean that's the way I see it. Is that reasonable, or is that?
It
Yes.
is.
It is. Okay.
Now, the people who will argue against it, so we won't talk much about that.
All right. Well, we won't go there.
Right. But there's the obviousness of that, which we don't need to discuss too much.
Yeah, and everybody's got their own specific thing of what they think would be the right one to do.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are the center targets for results, because I've heard a couple of things mentioned at the table this evening, and I guess from our previous discussions, there are 3 or 4 or so really focus points of the things that the organization is looking to accomplish, both internationally but also domestically. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Bruce, what are the primary targets?
Well, there are 100 volunteer groups around the country, and about 2/3 of them are focusing on legislation that has its impact in developing countries.
Okay.
And the other third are focusing on legislation in Congress that has its impact here. But the focus is the same. It's all about ending poverty.
Okay.
So in the developing countries, which is what our particular group here is focusing on, we're focusing on creating, well, there's the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, and Malaria, which is setting out to do the kind of availability of medicines and so forth to end tuberculosis, AIDS, and malaria around the world, because those kill millions of people, each of them, every
Hear
year.
about that all the time, yeah.
And that can come back to us,
That
too.
can go back to us. Sure, guy gets
Right.
on an airplane and comes this way. Right?
Yeah, there was a case of that earlier last year.
Right. TB is coming back here, and I've heard
It is.
more about that.
Well, because of inadequate funding overseas, the public health programs in developing countries has led to treatments being not seen through, and it takes about 6 months of medication to completely get over it, but people feel better after 2. So if they stop taking their medication after 2 months, the TB strain is still in their system, and what hangs around and comes back is something that was able to withstand 2 months of medication.
Right.
So
So
it
now
gets
it's stronger,
it gets
it's
stronger and more
mutated.
resistant.
And it's a contagious disease, and so all you have
Right.
to do is get on an airplane from Africa to London, and you're that's
right.
a problem. Okay,
So that's one
that's
area.
one of them. Okay.
So another area is in the area of education for all. And we're currently pushing for a global fund for education, modeled after the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, and Malaria, which has been very effective.
So when you say global fund for education, sending kids to college or?
Well, no, in developing countries, this is enabling there to be funding for the schools so that all the kids can go to school.
For grammar school.
For
Okay,
grammar
for
schools.
kids. Kids to get basic education, how to read,
Right,
how to
it's
write,
basic
how to do
education.
arithmetic.
In many countries,
The idea is universal literacy.
Universal
Right.
literacy, okay.
in many of the developing countries, the way they try to balance their budget is by charging school fees to parents for their kids to be able to go to school. And poor parents aren't able to send their kids to school, or maybe they'll send one son, and the rest don't get to. So what this program is about is enabling all the kids to be able to go to school and to have the kids have schools and have teachers. There's, it's a big project to make that all happen.
Yeah, sure.
In some countries where they had school fees, where the U.S. paid for them and eliminated the school fees, the kids, they increased the next day. They showed up like 60 to 80% more kids
Wow.
that had not been in school because they couldn't afford it. All of a sudden,
And now
they
they're
can
able
come.
to do that. Okay, so we've got the health side of it
Right.
with AIDS, tuberculosis, and
Malaria.
We've got the education side, and what was the third one?
Well, the third area is called economic empowerment. And we are supporting the availability of microcredit. And microcredit is small loans on the order of $60 to $100 that in developing countries is enough for people to start a small business.
Right, sure.
With that kind of capital, they can start a small business and begin to grow their own family's economy. They can begin to grow that with their business, and it helps them, it helps their communities, and people are able to climb out of poverty.
And that makes a lot of sense from the micro perspective. If you translate that into a U.S. situation, you can start a business here in the United States. You can with a few $1,000s. Okay, people if you want, you can get into the trucking industry and be an independent trucker. You buy your truck, spend 10, 15 grand for a vehicle, and away you go. Okay, so in that sum of money here in the States is not a lot of money, and when you kind of equate that to what the incomes are and the economies are in small countries around some of the third world nations, $100 is a huge. It's comparable. Okay, so someone who you can give $100 to actually get a thriving small business going in another country, that means that they're not having to take handouts from the government. That means that maybe if they make a go of it, they can employ a couple of people, and so the whole thing has a positive thing.
And they also pay that back. It's
and
a
they pay
loan.
that. Oh, that's right. It's a loan.
a
It's a
loan.
microcredit loan. Cool. So we've got those kinds of goals, and there are from the international side, but also on the domestic side, we're trying to do similar things within the United States because we have our problems too. Okay,
Right.
we've got parts of the country where people aren't
Yes,
eating well.
domestically, none of us are experts in the domestic program, so I studied up on it before this. And one key thing is universal health care.
Oh yes.
Any healthy society needs to have people be healthy. If you're not healthy, things go badly. Second one is, I can look at my note because I'm not an expert, is farm bill reform. There's a lot of issues with the farm bill,
Right.
and especially there's a lot of nutrition which is available, which we grow, which doesn't get to people who need nutrition.
Right.
I don't know the details, but clearly there's a problem that can be solved easily there. And the third area domestically is the child tax credit.
Oh, okay.
To improve the way that works, that actually supports the poor people who are pulling themselves out of poverty.
So there's a lot of parallels and similarities to the international side as well. We've got a little less than 10 minutes left in the show, and I want to talk a little bit about, I'm interested in knowing why each of you became a results volunteer. Because I think that I'm looking at this from the standpoint of what is it that people can reach for? Okay, I mean, I think we have your website and phone number for the international organization. If people want to call and find out more about the organization and learn a little bit about it, can go online. If they're interested in participating in some way, shape, or form, they can do that. But let's, tell us a little bit about how come you're in this organization.
The thing that I saw when I was first talking to Peter about results is that it was a way to engage with something much bigger than me, with the political structure. I mean, who am I to talk to a politician?
Right.
And now I know a number of politicians personally.
And they appreciate that fact that you're bringing information to them.
They do. They're people just like you and me, and they don't know. They're not some super expert in things I have no knowledge about. And the fact is that as a results volunteer, I'm getting information available on the website and ideas from the results staff. There's a staff of 8 people in Washington, D.C. each week of what's happening. So it's not like I have to figure out what to do next. Here's some suggestions, and I just take action.
You said something just now that really hit a note with me about not someone, I don't know the content, I don't remember the exact context, but not being an expert in all things. And I think when we think about our elected officials, they have so much that they have to deal with.
Right.
If we are expecting them to be experts on all things, we're crazy. Okay.
Correct.
So if we can help them focus attention on areas that will have the highest leveraged event. I think of it in terms of cutting diamonds. If you do it right, you hit the right spot, you get this wonderful, brilliant, very beautiful and expensive stone. You hit it in the wrong direction and you have this shards of crystal all over the place that are like worthless, right? So what you're doing, what Results is doing, and what hopefully others who are seeing this show might want to participate in is doing, is helping them focus so that they can make the diamonds.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Whenever I visit a member of Congress for the first time, I always ask, well, why did you come to Congress? So the same question you're asking us. And they always say, everyone I've talked to and their aides, they always say, I came to make a difference. It's a hard work. There's no question that being a member of Congress or a senator or an aide, their hours are incredible. And I said, I came to make a difference. When I got to a certain point in college or in high school or after college, and I realized I want to give back to society. And what happens, they're in Washington. I grew up in Washington. And they get cynical. And you think, it's all about money. It's all about getting ahead. And because that's what everyone talks about. And they're so refreshed when we come to them and say, how about something that actually makes a difference?
Wow.
And say, oh my God, thank you. This is just what I'm exaggerating a little bit.
That's fabulous to hear, because I think we tend to forget that. We only hear the negatives about politicians, elected officials or whatever. But if it's true that they came there originally because they wanted to make a difference, then what you're doing is you're helping them tap back into that
Yes.
that basic desire and showing a way to fulfill it. Is that correct, Diane?
Yes, and they're thrilled to have volunteer lobbyists coming to speak to them on behalf of the poor.
Fantastic. And I think that's great. And as you used the word lobbyists, and I think that's a useful term here. And I think people need to hear that and understand that what we are doing, what Results is doing, is it is lobbying on behalf of those who don't have a voice for themselves, as
Yes.
opposed to lobbying for the pharmaceutical industry or whatever, because the term lobbyist has this
Exactly.
negative connotation. But the truth is that you do need someone to stand up for and speak to key issues that can have a leveraged result and difference. And I use that term result again, all right?
Yes.
But
Right.
we have just another minute or so we're going to have to wrap up here. But what we're talking about is things that can have an impact both domestically and internationally, and in a way that is going to not just be altruistic, but actually be directly beneficial to us here in the United States.
And exciting.
Yes.
And exciting.
There's something about just being proud of being human or proud of being an American. You're sending a man to the moon, actually getting, think about having universal literacy in the world. Every kid gets to learn to read their own language.
Yeah,
That
that's
would be
sweet.
just like proud of being human. We actually did that.
Yeah.
Now, whether you make money on it or not, that's for someone else to worry about.
Right.
But that's something all of us actually would be proud of, just because it's exciting.
But if everybody was literate, there'd be a lot more books sold.
That-
So there's
Yes,
a lot of other
yes.
stuff that you
Yes.
could do, and
That'd be
Well-
great.
put things on the web and they could read about it, the
Yeah.
internet
And
sell
really,
it.
Yeah.
there's a book I read called 3 Cups of Tea. I don't know if you've
I've heard of it, yeah.
But it makes it very clear that if you're educating and giving an opportunity, especially in certain countries, that we are preventing terrorism.
And that is a great way to end this this discussion, because what we're talking about is things that we can do, that the Results can do, and any of you folks out there who are interested in knowing more about their program, go on their website, or you can send us an email at info@referencepointtv.com. So Diane, Peter, Bruce, I want to thank you for coming and joining us here at Reference Point. It's been fabulous having you folks back again, and I wish you tremendous success, and I'd like to see the results from Results. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being out there in the audience, and we'll see you next time on Reference Point.
Great.
Thank you.